So excited to sit here for a little bit and calm down before I get to go. But awesome. This is our fiscal year 27 budget presentation for student services. So I wanted to start a little bit to talk about this is kind of the overview of the presentation today. We'll talk about our core values and beliefs, mandated and monitored, things that we should know, what an educational disability means. There's been some questions about what it is that we do, and so I'm going to try to dig into that a little bit more. A role of a para, our budget priorities, and our highlights. Our core values and beliefs. This is something that we talk about across the entire district. The vision of the Jaffrey Range Cooperative School District is to inspire, engage, and empower all learners to thrive in their lives and communities. And all means all. For us in student services, there's a lot of that's legally mandated and morally obligated. For every action, there is a consequence, for better or for worse. And sometimes we take actions that we believe will lead us down one path, and they often can lead us to another. And those are things that we should be keeping in consideration as we move forward. That leads us to mandated and monitored. We talk a lot in student services about it's legally required. Much of our budget is in the default budget. It is legally required. There's nothing we can do about it. But I don't know that people understand the depth of what that is. So the IDEA is the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. It is a federal law that legally mandates the support and services for students who meet the criteria for an educational disability. It is about a 200 to 300 page document that is one guideline after another that very clearly outlines things from you have 10 days to do this, 15 days to do this. Some of those are calendar days and some of those are business days. The expectations that are within the IDEA are pretty substantial. Additionally, what people may not know is the state of New Hampshire guidelines often surpass the federal guidelines. So the federal guidelines may give you 25 days and the state gives you 15. That is an example and not actually a true example of anything. But the federal guidelines often surpass, and those we are highly monitored on. Things such as our dropout and graduation rate for students with disabilities, our preschool transition dates, the day somebody turns 3, regardless of when that falls in the school year, they are entitled to services within the school district. We are highly monitored on, did those services happen at the date of age 3? Time in an general education setting versus a special ed setting, highly monitored. Test scores compared to general ed test scores. The number of students who participate in state testing who are identified with educational disabilities. Transition plans out of high school. Discipline, service logs, Medicaid logs. When we talk about what is required to be part of special education, the monitored and mandated pieces cannot be underemphasized. For instance, since school has started, we have undergone a Medicaid audit, an LEA determinations audit, which is a whole bunch of those things that are listed here. All of these pieces they're checking, are we meeting these criteria? We are in the middle of a program approval and general supervision audit, where they are auditing every aspect of our IEPs, of our evaluation process, of the places where students go to get services. Let's see, we have Medicaid, LEA. One of our schools is an ATSI school, meaning that our test scores between general ed and regular ed have a disparity. And we are in a place where now we're being audited at that. What are we doing and how can we do that better? All of these things are extraordinarily time consuming and right to do, but they're all based on law that keeps changing. So not only are we highly mandated and monitored, the laws change on what is expected regularly. The impact of that is there are conversations often about why are there so many special educators? Why are there so much administration in the special education? Because someone has to be on top of, and usually someone's, all of these things. What is the law saying now? What are the expectations? And are we monitoring that while still providing valuable services and education for students? So those are things for you to be aware of what goes into special education. The best part of special education is working with students, is providing education to kids who need it, to closing gaps, for teaching kids how to do great things. The expensive part is all of this, and it has to be done. It is legally mandated. The next slide tells you what happens if you don't. So our finances are also really, really tied to this. If we do not meet those legally mandated pieces that we just looked at, we do not get our IDEA and preschool and general ed grants. This year, we got almost $405,000 for the IDEA and another $9,000 from PK. So almost $406,000 comes into this district through a grant because we meet and work really hard to monitor and make sure that we do all of those pieces that we talked about before. Roughly $100,000 comes in between 1 and 150 in Medicaid revenue. Special ed aid, that is the cost, the money that we receive back after spending money for students who have excessive costs for special education. In the 23-24 school year, we got back almost $500,000. We have not yet heard from the state on what our revenue will be for that piece. It's later than it usually is, but the state DOE also is having issues with staffing, and so things are slower. Other pieces that if we do not keep on top of all of those mandated and monitored pieces, we could end up in things like due process, people coming and saying that we did not do what we were supposed to do. Luckily, we have not ever had that happen in our district. Those can be extraordinarily costly. So we pay up front to make sure that we have things in order so we don't get to that place. And additionally, it costs money to make sure people are trained. So student services administration, case managers, paras, all need to be trained to provide the services to meet the expectations of what that means when we say legally mandated. There have been some questions about what this means to be educationally disabled. So I wanted to talk and give kind of an overview what that is. There are 13 areas of disability in the state of New Hampshire that you can qualify under, and you may have one of those, but you also have to also require specially designed instruction. And I'm going to give you an example. You may have a medical diagnosis of autism for your child that is not impacting their ability to access education. They are medically diagnosed, but do not require any specially designed instruction. They may need a couple of accommodations. They may need access to a couple of things, but they don't need specially designed instruction. They would not qualify as educationally disabled for an IEP. So that's where that falls. If you become and fall within that diagnosis of educationally disabled, you are entitled to a FAPE, which is a free and appropriate public education, which means that at the taxpayer's expense, you get an education that is right for you. The next few slides, or a couple slides, are some graphics that are provided from the DOE to us. They are from the year 2023, so they're the most current that we have right now. This is potentially a little bit difficult to see, but those are the 13 categories of disability within the state of New Hampshire. And you can see the state is yellow and the blue is our district. And so where we fall in categorizing the students that we do have that are identified in different places. You will see DD, that means developmentally delayed. Our number is much higher. And the reason for that is that districts can choose to have developmental delay or not. That's a global or an umbrella diagnosis for kiddos ages 3 to 10. So we might see that they have some communication issues or they're not learning as quickly, but we're not entirely sure why. We can put it under developmental delay up until 10. And then by 10, we have to find one of the other diagnosed places. The other one that's different is SLD, which is specific learning disability. And that is often where those DD kids would go. So you would see that some of those, or in SP, which is speech, the way that I think it's written on here, which would be a communication disorder. So those students may fall more within those to be closer to a state average. The other one that might be a little bit different is our other health impairment, or OHI, are students that sometimes in some districts fall within what's called ED, or emotional disturbance. So those students with significant anxiety or depression could fall within either of those because they're a medical diagnosis, but also impact their education. We tend to fall more in OHI than other districts may tend to fall more into emotional disturbance as diagnoses. So that's kind of, it's just a picture. You can see generally that we're pretty close to the state average. The next slide gives you our rates of identification, which means our percentage of students versus that are identified versus not across the state. This graphic really clearly indicates that we are not identifying students more than anybody else. Generally, we're also not identifying students less than anyone else. We're really within the state average. We are a little less this year, or the 2023, we were right at state average 2024. This ebbs and flows. Special ed is a moving target at all times, but we're right. And I share these slides with you because it's easy to see that our costs increase year after year after year, but that's because costs increase. It is not because our service models have changed or we're all of a sudden identifying more students than we were. The next slide talks a little bit about the para. We've had a lot of discussions about why do we have so many paras? The cost of paras really impacts our budget. What do paras do? So students are afforded the opportunity to have a para if they have needs in the safety, medical, communication, or academic realm. So they have to fall within one of those places, and it needs to be fairly substantial. If a student has a need in one of those areas that then requires an adult to be with them in order for them to access education, then they may be assigned some para support. Wanted to talk a little bit about what that might look like. Some of our students, for instance, have communication devices. They are nonverbal. They only can communicate through a device. They push buttons. The buttons talk for them. This is a long process to learn how to use and to learn how to communicate for other students and staff to communicate with them. Students who have that depth of communication need an adult with them for quite a while, often throughout their entire school career, to help them maneuver communication-wise in order to access education. There are other students who need help in math class. And these are some examples why. When we do our evaluations, we look at how our students learn through their cognitive processes. And two of the things that come up really often are working memory and processing speed. Working memory is your ability to put a number of things into your mind and maneuver them around. So if I give you a 5-digit number and told you to put it in numeric order, that would be working memory. For some kids, that's great. I can totally do that. For other students, that's really hard. And I need to write it down, and then I need to write down each one and cross them off as I go. That takes way more time. If a teacher is teaching in a classroom and gives instruction, and my working memory requires me to write it down and maneuver things written before I can get there, I've now missed 10 minutes of instruction. I might need a para to do the writing for me, so I just listen, so then I can go and maneuver the information. The other one is processing speed. Processing speed is how quickly you can take in information and move it around. Again, you have some people who take in lots of information, moving things around, able to process what's going on around them very quickly. And there are other people in the world who listen and think and need to process it before they can move to the next piece. I'm in a history class, and the teacher just told me that the Great Wall of China was built in making up an example I know nothing about. And all I heard was China, and now I'm processing what I know about China, and now we're on to something else. I don't even know what comes after China. I might need somebody to take notes for me again, so that afterward I have all of the documentation because I missed part of that because I didn't process fast enough. It was not that I couldn't understand the information. It was not that I couldn't manipulate it. I needed more time and more supports to do that. And so I might need a para to help me to do that so that I can take that information with me and move forward. Those are the roles that we have for para, and it can be really, really, really significant one-on-one, and it can be working in a classroom to re-cue and re-give the assignment and let people know this, let students know this is what you need to do next. I wanted you guys to look a little bit about what that looks like then. This is, again, a federal and state mandate. We call this least restrictive environment in special ed. It's LRE. It's just something we know. We decide where a student best gets their support in this kind of hierarchy. And I put numbers or money signs next to it so you have a better idea of what each of these things cost. So you may be identified with an educational disability, but you can get all of your support that you need in the general education setting. So it costs a little bit. There's some specially designed instruction that's happening. So it's a little bit more than what a general education student might be getting. It's not substantial. Then you have students who need pull-out. That's less than 60% of the day. And that may look like they need a speech service and an OT service, or they need to have specific math instruction 20 minutes a day, and the rest of the day they're in the classroom. That costs a little bit more. The next step is self-contained within the school district. And that means students who are more than 60% of the day need their instruction in a special ed setting. Those are our students who may need to have all of their reading instruction and maybe all of their math instruction in a special ed setting because they're substantially below grade level and it needs to be provided in a very different format versus students who may only need to have the same instruction or a little bit slower, a little bit faster, or in a different environment. The next section is a special education day school. So there are students that, regardless of what we can do here, we cannot meet their needs. They need all of their instruction in a much smaller setting. They may not be able to handle the large, although we are a small school district, being in a school or a classroom of 20, a school of 300 is too much. It needs to be very small. It needs to be provided in a very specific way. Those are your day school students. It becomes more expensive. The next setting is the residential school. And those are students for a variety of reasons. One, maybe we find a day school that's right for them, but it's so far away that we can't transport them. Or they're so significantly disabled that a day school isn't enough. They need around-the-clock care. They need around-the-clock support. That's an out-of-district residential placement. And the last piece is a homebound or hospital setting. And the cost of those varies widely, and they're often shorter periods of time as we look towards what other placement that might be. I wanted to give some examples. And so whenever I give presentations, it's hard because we have to be very careful about confidentiality in special education. The rules are so incredibly careful, for instance, that when you open a drawer of cumulative files, you should never be able to look in the files and know if a student receives special education or not by looking in a file. Really, really, really careful about not separating students by this, and no one needs to know who isn't part of the program. Because of that, I rarely can give any examples about any of this because we're really, really careful. But I did reach out to some parents, and I'm now very passionate about what I do. I did reach out to some parents, and I have some examples of what these things might be. So in the general education with special education support, my husband, these are examples and stories from some other parents. My husband and I decided that raising a family in a small community was what we wanted. We were blessed to have 2 children. I have one child that excelled. Education and learning came easy. The learner was fortunate to participate in athletics, National Honor Society, Interact, and received AP credit in some classes. I have one child that struggled. This child received early supports and services through RISE and transitioned to the town preschool on an IEP at age 3. Continues to struggle with academics, and gains are smaller, but monumental for us. I will not say that it has been smooth in education and that there have never been disagreements nor conflicts. The special education process is never one that is easy to navigate. As a parent, my emotions have run across a spectrum, and always with an underlying feeling of anxiety for my child. Those feelings have always been acknowledged in my meetings as a parent. I can't say that one person has made a difference because I feel that it has been a village to help raise my child. I can remember being in IEP meetings and questioning a goal. I remember the following discussion and modifications made to that goal. I remember supportive notes home on gains made and suggestions to help my child progress on skills. I remember general education teachers supporting my child's IEP and having valuable input to both me as a parent and my child's team member. I suppose if there is one thing that I want to convey as a parent, It is that special education has been a part of my child's life since age 3 and continues to be an essential part of education at life at 16. The educators in my child's life have had an invaluable input and have taken part in raising and evolution of my child. Although the faces and staff have changed throughout the years, my role as a parent has been steadfast and acknowledged as always being essential in education and IEPs. I feel that this district has always kept an open line of communication, and that although this journey as a parent can be hard, emotional, and worrisome, my child's needs and my concerns have continued to be addressed. The level 2, pull out support less than 60%. My child was born with a variety of medical concerns that impacted learning and access to education. At age 3, my child started preschool at Ringe Memorial School and continued through special education from preschool to grade 12. Processing speed, learning disabilities, and physical impairments were constant barriers, yet the incredible support of all staff for my child was from all staff. My child participated in sports, clubs, went on to service trip with Interact, and went on for further training after high school in a chosen trade. This was only possible due to the special ed support, where my child learned to read, to walk, to compute, and to grow a sense of self. The third one down, self-contained. Special education has been a wonderful gift to our family. Our student has grown so much in life skills, and much of that is due to the special education received from the school. It was the speech therapist at Ringe Memorial School that introduced us to AAC communication, that's augmentative communication. We had never heard about this type of communication. The speech therapist tried some different programs and settled on Proloquo to go. This has been life-changing for us. Our learner can communicate with school, family, and friends. It was her physical therapist that worked with us to get the right support for ankles and really helped to go from a little person that crawled to walking at the age of 4. All the physical therapists have been wonderful working with our learner in the school, as well as giving us exercises to work with at home. The staff that works with our learner from the one-on-one to the ILC teachers to the therapists have been such a huge blessing. They all work so hard to meet our learner where they're at and to help us move forward in education and life skills. It is nice as a parent to have all of these services in one spot. Until you have a child with special needs, you don't understand what a gift this is. I hope the taxpayers can try to understand the best of their ability why this budget is so very important. These kids and young adults have a hard road ahead of them already. As a community, let us help them by making sure that there is a budget that can provide these services. And the last one is in the special day program. Nonverbal is difficult. Sometimes it cannot be met in a district, and due to the needs of such an intensive therapies, small groups, and life skills instruction. These placements are tailored for the specific needs of learners who can go from nonverbal, which can result in combative and destructive behaviors, to living with adult supports and making a positive contribution to self, family, and community when given a chance at instruction. And what I would end with is that all learners enter into our buildings as someone's pride and joy, someone's baby, with the belief that they will be seen, they will be safe, and they will grow. Some go on to do great things, like work in government jobs that can impact the world for good. And some go on to do great things, like care for children and fix lawnmowers. All of our children deserve a foundation to excel. The next slide I'm ready for, really. Sorry about that. This kind of gives you an idea of where we're at then in those monitoring pieces and all of the things I just talked about. This is the percent of students in 2023 that participate in regular classes more than 80% of the day. You will see, and if you go back to that, how much they cost to be in regular ed versus a different setting, over time, our numbers have skyrocketed in us providing services and having our students in a general ed setting with their peers, learning and access to curriculum. The next slide is the number of students who participate less than 40% of the day. So those are the kids that are in more of those self-contained classrooms. Again, you will see over time how that number has drastically reduced. Our students are in classrooms, our students are with friends, and our students are learning in the best research-based, best places that they can by incredible teachers. The last one is a picture of what it looks like over time of our students who have been placed in separate schools, residentially or day programs. Again, our costs go up, but this clearly shows you that our numbers go down. Our percent of students that we have placed out of our buildings have gone over time down and down. All right, the actual budget conversations. Our priorities in student services is to maintain restorative classrooms. Those are 2 classrooms at Jaffrey Grade School that are self-contained classrooms for our students with social emotional needs. There is a salary increase per CBA. There is no additional staff, but that is one of our priorities is to maintain that. Additionally, behavioral and SEL support is a priority. We do have a BCBA or behaviorist in our budget as a full-time position. We were not able to fill that position in that way this year, so we still have a part-time BCBA that we've had come in, but our hope is to find a full-time person to provide those services for us. Our priority is to fill open positions. Wouldn't that be swell? Wages and salary increases are in the CBA, and then professional development. As you guys know, professional development was removed from all of our budgets last year. I'm asking to restore $10,000 back to be in, and that $10,000 professional development generally goes to training our admin as well as our case managers on the constantly changing rules and regulations of providing education. Staffing, there's no new staff added to the budget this year. I did want to give you an overview of what our staffing is. These will not be the same numbers as Carrie gives you because I just added bodies. I did not add full-time. So there's a whole bunch of part-time people that add up to a whole bunch of weird things. We had 97 bodies in 23-24, and we're posing 91 in 26-27. Our costs go up, but we have cut staff. These are our student trends over the last 3 years. Our student populations have gone down. The percentage of students in out of district has gone up. Charter schools continue to be a place that we really incur a large cost for a variety of reasons for our students who participate in charter schools. There's administrative costs as that case management falls back onto our administrative team, as well as providing services. Charter schools don't often have certified services, so therefore we provide those through contracted services that are much more expensive, or our staff provide them. It gets a little tricky. And then our out-of-district place students is up slightly. That's a never-ending moving target. So this was a snapshot in time of last week. As of this week, the number is different. And next week, it'll probably be different again. Kids move in and out all of the time. And I know that you guys hear that every year, but in the month of October, I had 2 high-cost people move in and 1 move out. It just is. Here's our highlights. Our out-of-district costs over time. So it just gives you kind of an overview of what it's looked like over time. Our costs this year are $104,000 over last year's approved budget. That goes into the default. Those are IEP required services. Our contracted services are $20,000 over last year. However, last year we were able to sign some multi-year contracts, which actually, our increase is actually $20,000 what it would have been had we not signed those multi-year contracts with some of our contracted staff. Transportation increases by $20,000. That's what it is. We have a contract with our busing company. There's also an additional $6,000 added for transition field trips. Those are students at the high school level who require a transition plan that includes being able to access their community, to understand how to go to the grocery store, or how to sometimes to get jobs, to volunteer in the community. Those are required. You can remember back to those mandated pieces. The transition plans are required for students. So that additional $6,000 is to provide transportation. We don't live in a community where you could walk anywhere. We used to be able to walk to Rite Aid for some and do some teaching of how to buy things. Dollar General is too far to walk, so we're especially for some of our students that this would fall into. So there's that additional $6,000. And then our supplies and professional development, like I said, I've asked to put $10,000 back in. There's also a $4,000 fee for advertising. There are things that we have to put in we're legally required to put in the newspaper, and advertising in the newspaper is really expensive. And then we have reduced our supply lines by $5,600. So next year we've cut our supplies for our special education staff by a fairly large amount to try to keep this within a reasonable line. So totals for student services, those lines that we are contractually obligated to do, those are that are not contractually obligated. So those highlights that I just showed you, for 27 is $55,000 over last year's approved or adopted budget. And frankly, that's as close to flat budgeting as I can get you. For those lines, including all contractual obligations, so that's all salaries as well, we're about $427,000 over. And what I want to share is that last year, $500,000 was removed from my proposed budget to support that $300,000 or that $3 million shortfall, knowing that student services has a $500,000 trust fund and that we often can't fill all of our open positions. So we took a chance and took $500,000 out. The budget that's going in has all of those things back in and is $72,000 lower than was proposed last year. So it looks higher, it is higher than what was adopted, but that's your reasoning why.
Thank you, Jen. Are you ready for questions?
You bet.
All right, board members, who would like to go first? Thank you, Christine.
Thank you. Amazingly thorough. I always learn so much when you present. It's mind-blowing all that you do, your staff. Thank you for being here on Saturday. Because I know that you work and your staff work well beyond 40 hours a week. I am hoping that you can talk to me for a moment about how do we reach families who maybe don't participate in our schools? How do we let them know about the 3-year transition? How do we let maybe a family that has traditionally homeschooled their kids know that their 3-year-old can be tested? How do we communicate with those folks?
It's a great question. There's a couple of things that happen. One, generally our referrals come from, so the medical team will know when a student is significant. They refer to early supports and services. In our area, that's RISE. RISE then reach out if they are found eligible through RISE and they get close, they're at 2, I think between 2 and 2.5, then they refer them to us. So most of our referrals come that way. And the other place is a legally mandated requirement called Child Find that requires us twice a year to advertise that we're having screenings for anyone who has any concerns within our area. And that's one of some of the things that need to go into the newspaper. We put it on our website. We put it on Facebook. We send notices to all doctors' offices. We put it in the newspaper. I'm sure there's other places, and Storm Metters oversees our preschool, and there's other places that we advertise that. And then they just call the school and say, I'd like my child to come to your Child Find. We set them up with an appointment and we do screenings at that point. A parent can also at any time just contact our office and say, I have concerns, and we have a referral meeting. We bring them in and we decide what to do from there. So I don't know if there's any way to give more information out about that than what is.
Sounds pretty thorough to me. And then over time, I've heard you talk about how there are fewer professionals and even paras in the pipeline who are interested in working in special ed. And so we've been going more towards contracted positions. And I know you went over this, but I think that deserves to be discussed briefly, separately, because it does increase our costs.
So some of our positions have far fewer people that are interested in going into a teacher's contract. So things like our school psychologists, our related services, which would be speech, OT, PT, those all require master's level degrees and substantial training. And generally, they're looking as professionals are often now looking for higher pay and lower work weeks. So they go through contracted services. So if we needed to post for any of those positions, it is not often that we get any applications that are wanting to work within our CBA for those positions. And they can be substantially more expensive. The other piece is that they work less. So like you just said, we don't work 40 hours a week. Next week is probably a 40-hour week for most people because we only have school 2 days. And I'm not actually even joking that we don't work 40 hours a week, but a contract employee works 40 hours a week. So we actually need a little bit more when we have a contract. And I foresee that will be continuing what happens. And I don't in any way have hard feelings for people who want to be paid for what they do. We also are finding really difficult to find paras, and more para applications are coming to us through contracted services that are more expensive. I just did talk with a young lady actually this week that went through a contracted service and asked why she chose that instead of just applying for the school district, and was told I thought I was applying to the school district. It just said Jaffrey Grade School. So the way that the recruiters are working in the Indeed world are things that we need to figure out so that we post things in a better way so that people can apply to us. So that's another level to all of the things that we do, is how to recruit and put ourselves out there. We use a thing called SchoolSpring. It's extraordinarily cumbersome. It's difficult to, especially if you're not a teacher, it's a really difficult process to use. So there's constantly people, I have notes, pages of notes right now on my desk of this is what we need to do next and the recruitment process for that.
If I could go first, just for one thing, because I want to
Please.
hop on the para piece. Could you talk about, I'm wary of acronyms, and para is an acronym, but also a para professional is a certification as well. Could you just talk about what actually being hired as a para professional is, what they need for that? Because it's not just somebody off the street, they actually have some qualifications.
It can be either. So we don't require paras to be certified. So you have to have a high school diploma to become a para. And a para is what others might consider a classroom aide or a teacher's aide. So it's an adult that supports a student. You're given instructions on what that might look like. We also do hire people who are para certified. We have a different lane for that. And a para certification requires an associate's degree or to pass a para certification test through the state. And that just indicates that you've had a little more training beyond high school.
Thank you. John, did you have more questions? Thank you for the interruption.
Sure, no, absolutely. There's so much that you covered here that I'm sure we could all ask you questions for the next hour and a half, and I know there's not time for that. Couple of things I wanted to ask about. Just a very straightforward, you mentioned SEL and BCBA. What do they stand for?
SEL is social emotional learning. So students who may have some trauma or PTSD in their background, so when your behavior background, your emotional background is in the way of you being able to sit in a classroom, you have to learn how to work through that before you can learn how to multiply. Oh, BCBA is a board certified behavior analyst.
So that's a mouthful, board certified behavior analyst, but you know, trying to understand this, I think we all, you know, as board members, bit by bit, try to pick up pieces of what it is you do and what you face. And these, you know, people like that, board certified behavior analysts, you know, they're, I guess, integral to creating the least restrictive environment for these students who, you know, if they get sent to an overnight program and they're isolated from their community, maybe 100 miles away from Jaffrey, not only does it cost us, but what kind of life is that for the student? And then I often think about when you were reading some of those testimonials to what the special education has meant to parents. I've thought about how much it means to the rest of us as citizens of New Hampshire. Because these young people, when they come out, whether it's at the age of 18 or 22, if they really have serious neurological or physical disabilities, I don't even understand what the things are that keep them from graduating, but they're going to be in our communities, presumably. We can't just hide them away behind a wall or an institution or something. And so the fact that they can do some things, maybe hold down certain jobs that aren't too demanding, that's a benefit not only to the parents, I guess, but to the
If
rest.
given the proper foundation, everyone has the ability to be a contributing member to our society. And we are legally required to do that, but we are morally obligated to do that too. So yes, everyone can be a contributing member to our society.
I heard you mention that the state of New Hampshire has some requirements that are even stricter than the minimal federal requirements, and I guess that's a good thing, right? In most
Sure.
cases. I mean, it's more expensive, and I guess the last thing I'll ask, and it's just, what about the percentages of special education costs that are covered by local communities, by the state, and by the federal government? I know that's been an issue ever since the special education laws were enacted, what, 50 years ago? Or
Yeah, I don't even know. So we do have a $400,000 IDA grant. That's not part of our general, it's not considered part of our general budget though. So if we're at a $10 million budget, 400,000 additional of that is in a federal grant. So that, I don't know what percentage that would be, math people. It's small. And then the state in the sped aid, and I did not go into that because it's convoluted and there's definitely misunderstanding. But generally what happens is the district has to spend up to $80,000. And then we get a percentage back beyond 80. So if a student costs 150, then that additional, we get a percentage of that back. If they go over 250 or 300,000, then we get another percentage back on that overage piece. So we still have to spend up to 80 to 200, $300,000 per student. And then we get a percent back. So that was the 450 that we got back the year before last.
so
So again, it's a small percentage.
just to verify, I was reading about this a little bit, going through the notes that we've been given, and it sounds like the local community picks up most of that first 80,000 or
100%.
100%. And then there's a percentage that the state will pick up of the part between 80 and 150. But that's only if the money's been budgeted.
Correct.
So if we're supposed to get back up to 20% of that overage, and the state doesn't have enough money in the budget, then we don't get that much back. Is that right?
Yes, that has been in the past. Right now, they did pass a new law or what have you that says that they will fund it as it says it will be funded.
Okay.
So there's that.
Good, that's better. Thank you.
What's that, John? All right, okay, we'll come back to you. Sandra?
I don't have anything. Thank you, John. That was really an excellent presentation. Very clear on where our costs are going. I will make a comment though on John's thing, and you're saying the state will reimburse us. But what is the state saying? We'd be better off putting everybody in out of district placement to get more money back. We want to keep them in-house.
No, because we still have to spend, so in-house it may cost 15,000. Out of district is gonna cost us at least 150, so you still have to spend 80. And then they'll start to talk about giving you some money back.
I think the goal that we're working for is to be inclusive and have our learners here if we can do that. With the services that they need.
Chris?
Yeah, thank you. Again, and certainly I'll tell how passionate you are about what you do, and I'm sure the rest of your staff is as well. I don't think this is something that you necessarily do unless you are. And I think that points to, you know, probably issues that we have with hiring and staffing. I think it takes a certain person to be able to do this. And I think the current climate and these challenges don't help for sure. I usually pride myself on having a lot of questions, but I think you did a really good job in the slides that you did choose to go through and the data that you did choose to point out of kind of shedding some light on some of the, we all went through this last year, and it's really special education because it's third of our budget is always a topic of conversation, right? It always has been, probably always will be as we go and do this. And I think you really illustrated and contradicted some of those falsehoods that are out here that, just get disseminated as if, and I think you show quite clearly that we're, pretty much on par with everyone else in the state. There's no, increasing of numbers of costs. And I think that's what we've always said. It helps to have the numbers, just as board members and as public to be able to point to that and say, well, no, this is actually, it's pretty normal, right? Some people may not agree that have, 20% of our students are identified, right? It shouldn't be that way. Well, you follow the law and you follow the process, and it is that way. And by the way, it's the same in every other community. To me, that gives us confidence that, yeah, there's not something out of whack here. We're not constantly comparing to everybody else, but it does kind of tell you that the numbers are, there's nothing out of whack there. When we talk about the funding, I always thought that it was in the adequacy aid, right? Which, has been found to be unconstitutional. Both the special ed level and just the regular adequacy aid. I always thought it was a bit laughable, the per student additional that you get for everyone that's on an IEP. I think it's like $1,400 additional this year. It goes up a little bit. I may be high in even saying that $1,400, but I'm guessing that an additional $1,400 doesn't from the state per student doesn't get much. And again, the rest of that cost is to local taxes. So I think that's something that we should, make sure we highlight in these budget discussions. It's just how much of a burden it does place on the taxpayer. And again, despite the fact there have been court cases that have decided that that's clearly not enough, there hasn't been any relief in sight. And despite all of the bills that are going on right now in Concord to focus on education, I've looked through them. I get the emails every week. I don't see very many, if any, focusing on addressing that issue of the, lack of special ed support at the state level. And again, we don't need to beat a dead horse, but all of these are required by state, by the federal government. It's going to happen. Certainly the kids deserve it. In getting back to the legislature, I really wish that they would look at this special ed piece of it for fairness and for property taxes. I see a lot of movement there and discussion around this choice movement, this freedom movement. Everyone should get what they want. I don't see any of that focused on these learners, right? It's primarily no change for them. So I think that, yeah, everyone deserves that education. If I would like to see more attention at that level on making that fairer for communities. Anyways, You did note in here that we did during last year's budget session, take out that $500,000 and it's still out is what we're saying here. It looks like it to me.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that actually $500,000
It's
was
just all-
removed prior to.
Yeah, I remember that.
Yes, there was $800,000 completely removed prior to.
And that's still-
the proposed budget, and then the 3 million on top.
And just so everyone here understands what we did there last year, right? We had a high budget. We did take out quite a bit. We took quite a bit of risk to me, even with that budget that we presented. And so what we did was, we have these, we'll say, and I think we've been pretty clear, it's difficult to hire. All our I think I saw like 5 open positions. Since I've been here, we look at it, I think we have typically 5 to 10 open para positions. It's just the nature of for whatever reason, why that's the case. In last year's budget cycle, before we proposed it, we went in and said, okay, we know we have 10 positions, 5 are likely to be unfilled. Let's only budget for 5.
We budgeted for all positions.
Mhm.
We took money out of other lines. I
Right,
need to be very clear about that.
important.
These are the positions we know we need. We continue to budget for all positions. Because if we don't, and then we can never say that we were
So the
going.
overall.
We took them out of
budget.
other lines.
Okay, well, that's important for me to know too, so I apologize if I misspoke there.
I think that a lot of it came out of our out of district costs because we have a trust fund should we need to.
Yeah, so we kept all and I think we were very clear in those discussions
Yeah,
that we were prepared to fund all of those positions, but it was kind of I'll admit, it was like a risky move that we took. The only purpose being to lower the budget.
The only other thing I would say is that while it's not the conventional practice, we look at trend data, and we felt as comfortable as we could because we need to be able to say that we're not decreasing this area in particular because we just want to cut it. That can't just do that. Because like you said, we've had some times where we haven't been able to hire certain positions. We've had money left over. So we had a trend data line that suggested that this was a relatively safe amount. Plus, so it wasn't just because we had a trust fund. That was just and we have a buffer on top of that if something were to happen. But we have a clear line of how the spending has gone over years.
But I mean, that was even a risky approach. And still is,
It's
right?
not
It would
not a
be-
normal approach.
The right thing to do would just be to budget for all those positions.
Mhm.
Clearly, which we are doing, and will say in that meeting, right?
And that is what we're doing here.
Committed to hiring everything, so I apologize if I said something, but the fact is, we did go through, after our first budget and remove $500,000, which is a significant amount of money.
Yeah.
And we budgeted some of those positions at a cost that we knew was lower than what the actual cost would have been.
So, yes, so over the course of years, we have an opportunity to look at what we are budgeting for, and this is not just student service, this is positions in general. So if we have open positions, we can, master step 5 is the sweet spot. When I first arrived here, I think we were doing master step 10, master step 15 or whatever like that. Carrie and I did an analysis, found out that the average, and we were almost always right on over the years. We were able to, cut back hundreds of thousands for the years that the first 5 or 6 or so. And we changed it to master step 5. Last year, we started to budget to also help support this. And this is not actually part of the 800,000. This is, so if you think about it this way, this is another probably 150,000 or so that we removed. We started to budget at bachelor's step 1, which is not as reasonable. No.
And I guess the only point I'm trying to make here for people to understand is I know that when we brought that forward in January or February, not a lot of people understood that process that went on before that, where even the special education budget was substantially reduced before we proposed it.
And that's
So
one of the
that work has
reasons,
been
yeah.
done. I know, and not a lot of people saw it. It's been done. We've gone through it. We've taken those, to me, educated risks in order to give the budget a better chance of passing, because you know the environment. So I just want people to understand the background there. So if it's there's not a ton to go through and say, and so you're saying costs just go up. An example of that is, out of district placement. So I assume what happens is just we have a student placed in an out of district school, and do their tuition ever go down?
No,
Right?
we,
So,
we figure a 2 to 5% increase. Sometimes it's as much as 15 from one year to the next.
right. So what are your options if you don't like that?
You pay it anyway.
Right.
Yeah, few.
There's few, right?
Mhm.
Because I know that's specifically in our area, there's probably not a ton of other options. And if something's working for a student, are you gonna uproot them to save on a 3% increase at their school? And by the way, any other school that they'd go to is also increasing by that much or even more. So I think those are important things to understand.
And I think I said, but I just want to be very clear, all of the graphs I shared were not graphs that we made. Those were from the DOE, from our dashboard, our special ed dashboards. Those are 100% state information.
In every one of those indicates that we are moving in the directions aligning with our goals
And our vision.
and our vision. Yep.
Yep.
And just to clarify for people that want to know, that's the Department of Education.
Yes.
Which has
sorry.
a site, has plenty of information. If anybody wants to go to the Department of Education site, plenty of information to look at.
Chris, are you good to go?
I think I'm done. And one more thing, all of those trends, right? Not only are they the right things to do, which is why we should be doing them. They also just happen to decrease our costs, I think is the point you were trying to make.
They decrease the increase of our costs.
Yeah.
Yes, they
Good way to put it.
mitigate against the increases. It could be a whole
Not-
lot more.
Not the main driver of why we're doing it,
Yeah.
but. Okay, yeah, I'm done.
Okay, those budget meetings that you mentioned, where that budget meeting in particular, where that 500,000 was cut, is one of the reasons that we're now doing every one of these meetings, live streaming, recording, public, like, it's a public meeting, and I think one person showed up to that meeting. And it's that, maybe two, but it was we have public meetings, they're all public. Nobody shows up to them, and so then they're kind of used against us. So now we want to make sure we have full record. Look, this is what's happening each time. All of this changes, all of this moves. We have to give the background first, and then we fine tune. And it takes time and it takes input. Speaking of input, Charlie, you still with us? Charlie, do you have some messages, some questions or comments on Jen's presentation? Check the messages. All right.
You have one
Can you-
question.
Can you
So
hear me?
short.
Yeah, Charlie's out.
Charlie's on.
Great.
Can you hear
Go
me?
ahead, Charlie. Yep, we can hear you now.
Yes, I said that I had quite a few questions, but Chris was able to ask most of them. First was a comment. The spread differential for FY27 is around 475K inadequacy aid. Okay, so there's roughly close to 500K that we'll be getting from the state for adequacy aid. I have another question that I'm asked frequently, which is, are we providing services to learners who are not from our district?
I'm just making sure in my brain. No, we don't, right now, we do not have any students who are not living in our district getting any special education services. We have had districts reach out to us because some of our programs are more robust than our surrounding areas to ask what it might cost to tuition students into our programming. But we currently don't have any.
Okay, thank you. You said that there were cost increase on different items. Can you give us an idea of how much, for example, what is the cost increase in outplacement or in therapy services or other examples of how costs are going up?
Can you go back a slide, Ruben?
Sure.
So our therapy services, our contracted services are going up about $20,000. Typically I would budget a 5% increase, which would be an additional 20 on top of that. But because we were able to secure multi-year contracts, that's substantially lower than in the past. And the out of district costs, I am budgeting a 2% increase, which is tight, but that is what I budgeted.
2% is about how much dollar-wise?
It's about $104,000 over 104,608 over current.
So out of the 400 and some odd increase, 100K of that's coming from just outplacement.
Yes, and that's on the second to last slide, Charlie.
Okay, thank
I
you.
don't know if you can see those.
And then, let's see. Yeah, I know you're talking about the adopted budget versus the proposed budget, but I have a question. If you're running by the adopted budget this year, is that what you're going to end up with as far as adopted, or are we anticipating from a forecast perspective that we're going to have more transfers to occur?
That we'll get more students in.
No, more. What happens is we have an adopted budget, but you can't forecast more than the adopted budget. All right, the system doesn't let you do that. So if you're going to spend more than what's in the adopted budget, you have to change that by a budget, by a line item transfer, which the board approves. Okay, I'm looking at what you really think you're going to spend at the end of the year. And is that going to be the current adopted budget, or are you anticipating anything extra?
I am anticipating what was proposed
Okay. Thank you.
as of last week.
Does that mean you're going to possibly propose something next week?
What I can tell you is that in October, 2 people moved in, 1 residentially placed, 1 needs to be a day placement, and 1 kid moved out that was residentially placed.
So other than people
So-
moving in, we're fixed.
Right, so we're giving a snapshot in time. I anticipate spending what was proposed, hopefully.
Thank you.
All right. Any further, Charlie?
That's it.
Okay, I have a couple. So on page 7 of the PowerPoint. Sorry, I have to scroll that way. Don't look, everybody, you'll get dizzy. Okay. Could you please, again, there's a number of acronyms here. And so could you just quickly tell us what these acronyms mean? But the purpose would be, you had said something, I think you said the phrase that we choose developmental disabilities where the state does not, or could you just elaborate on that? So I'm assuming that's a reporting, like how we would report language type of thing. I just don't want somebody coming back and saying, what, we have this many more kids in the state? Like I could see that. So I'd want to so if you could give us just the acronyms.
Sure.
And then tell us what you meant by we choose to report that way.
From the top to bottom, they are visual impairment, traumatic brain injury, speech language impairment, specific learning disability, this is an occupation or
Intervention?
orthopedic impairment,
Okay.
other health impairment, intellectual disability, multiple disabilities, hearing impairment, emotionally disturbed, developmental delay, DB.
TB.
That's okay. It's a 0.
We don't have any of them. And autism.
Okay.
So those are the areas. I don't know what DB is. Okay, so a better understanding, developmental delay are for students 3 to 10. And a district can choose whether or not they want to have developmental delay as one of their areas of disability or not. We have chosen to say, yes, we would like developmental delay to be one of our areas of disability. And some districts say they do not wish to have that. If we did not have developmental delay, we would have to find students eligible under one of the other areas. So like I said, most often that would be under occupation or I'm struggling. Speech, specific learning disability, maybe other health impairment. They have a medical impairment or mobility, which is the OI. Generally, when we get 3-year-olds, it's really hard. They're not where they should be, but also to say that they have a specific learning disability, which requires a cognitive test, is not highly effective at 3. So we have chosen as a district to say we'll do developmental delay. That gives us more time to tease out the specificity of what the disability is.
Okay, thank you. And if we could go to page 11, just something interesting that I noted. So on this graph, we're noting that we have 89, was it 89%? I have to go to up to. So we have an 89% rate of students who have some sort of differing ability in our regular ed classroom. And putting pieces together, our teachers, when you're certified as a teacher, as a regular ed teacher, you do not need special education training. Many of the current, and I mean within the last 5 years, courseworks ask you to have that. But that's not a requirement for most regular ed certifications to have any type of special ed training. You need things like behavior management and experience, but we are asking our general ed teachers, the vast majority, to also be teaching special education students in the classrooms. And we've been doing that for decades in this region. This is something that we pride ourselves on. We teach all students. I just want to make sure that we are cognizant of this. First of all, when we, again, talk about test scores, when you are training kids to be able to take a standardized test and you're training them in a room with people with many differing abilities, it takes more time. Very capable of doing it, simply takes more time. But we also need to really remember that professional development tuitions and trainings are not an extraneous piece of our budget. These are absolutely necessary to make our teachers be able to have common language, common skills to be able to move forward. And we're not just spinning our wheels as they're trying to teach a set curriculum to such varying abilities in the room. And so professional development needs to actually be really considered part of our main objective to getting our teachers to be able to be successful with all of our students. And that just really was a great graph for me to see, holy cow, we're exceptional at this, at keeping students in our main general ed classrooms, keeping equity, making sure that all students feel included and are valued. You know, there is such a powerful graph to me of what we do in the public education sector. There was one mention you said about the cost of our charter schools, of special education costs going to charter schools. Can you elaborate on that? So what percentage would you say, and then how much does it cost and what do they do if our Jaffrey Ridge School District is sending our special education budgeted funds, people, and resources to charter schools?
Oh, percentage wise, I'm not sure.
Yeah, and I didn't
I'm
say
at
that right,
about-
but I think you get it.
Yeah, so this year, I think I have budgeted just was looking at the POs. Probably $30,000 is going to the 2 charter schools where we have students. And so what happens is if you live in our district you belong to our district. And if you are found to have an educational disability and you go to a charter school, you are still entitled to the supports and services as outlined in IDA because it's a public school. Then it is the school district's responsibility financially to provide those services. In some charter schools, there are staff that are certified to provide those services, and in some there are not. So in those cases, when you have a charter school that's 40 minutes away, it does not make any sense for me to have a speech pathologist drive to the charter school 3 times a week for 15 minutes of speech services. So instead, what might happen is we might have online services here. So one of our speech pathologists may provide virtual services for that student. If that's not an effective way to provide services, depending, and some students it works fine and some not so great, then we may contract with an outside service that already goes to the charter school and is working with a variety of students from different districts. So that's more expensive. Some of our students in charter schools, just as they do here, need some para support. So then we end up paying for paras in those spaces. And then there's the cost of, we are still the LEA. So all evaluations, all observations, all paperwork, all still goes through our system. So although we are paying about $30,000, there's probably easily another $10,000 to $15,000 in the cost of the administrator that oversees all charter school meetings and all of our evaluators that are testing. Oftentimes our evaluators are driving to the charter school to provide testing and coming back. So easily another 15,000 to 20,000.
Thank you. All right. And I really appreciated the stories that you put forth. I understand that they're difficult and powerful. And I especially am pleased that you included the ones that started when we start bringing kids up, starting at that third birthday. I really appreciate that. And that you mentioned those in particular, because having that continuity of care is incredibly important. And not just to the students academically, but to the families that we're supporting. It's really, really powerful, especially at a time when we're talking about possibly putting some of the pre-K into a warrant article rather than the operating budget. And where we're not funding currently our 2/3 of our preschool program through the operating budget. That's through that special 1-year allocation. So I really appreciate you bringing that up, and I hope that stays in people's minds as we make these decisions and as we vote, honestly. So thank you for this opportunity. Ruben, you had some pieces.
Could I share just a clarifying on that, regardless of whether or not, whatever we do with our 4-year-old preschools, we are legally mandated to provide special education preschool services to students at age 3 at their 3rd birthday, should they qualify. So there will continue to be, so when you're looking at your budgets and we continue to talk about these things, there will always be some preschool that's in the operating budget. And those are the special education preschools are required, legally mandated, to be there again for those services at age 3. And then the additional services of our 4-year-old preschools. So they're slightly different. And if you're not here day to day and it's not your world, it's hard to differentiate all of these pieces.
Okay, thank you. And Ruben, go ahead, and then I'd like the board, because I know that I just keep writing as people talk. If I'm going to come back to the board in case you had anything else you needed to talk about for special education.
Yes, so one comment, one question, and I'm going back to this slide because as you were talking, I was looking at the dates actually, and I thought it was really neat because one of the items that I shared on Monday was a timeline of change process within the district. And one of the timelines was the 2008 to 2024 and with a restructuring effort that was going on. And it's very interesting to see that as we restructured, which was not only just a physical restructure, but also a philosophical curriculum and approach to restructuring, that this was happening during that time frame each year that we implemented, and I think that's very neat to see. It also corresponds nicely with more, more individuals in the classroom, looking at our increased graduation rates and successes there, and also our post-secondary placement in colleges and two-year schools and so forth. The question I have does have to do with what Lisa just brought up, which was the pre-K, but the 4-year-old pre-K. There, I am going to talk a little bit more about that today. I spoke about it Monday. And I didn't know if you had any information or perspective on that. It is not a special ed funded program. It is a regular ed funded program. It is not required by law. It is something that this district has implemented over a series of years, probably 2017 to about where we are right now in some fashion. We increased it fully during the COVID timeframes with the ESSER funds that we had. What benefit has that program, if we have any data or it's anecdotal data, has that had on the student services identification or support for the years following?
So I have a few things that are going through my head at this point. One being that we definitely have students who are identified in our 4-year-old programs. So they're getting the experience of a full day preschool so that when they move to kindergarten, they're more prepared to spend a full day and to be in classrooms. I also will say that our 2 special ed programs right now, it's a lot of convoluted, but they have to be 50% special education identified students and 50% typical peers. If they offset that number, then it becomes a special ed placement, which becomes problematic. There is a likelihood this year that our 2 special ed programs, which are a total of 4 classes because they're half days, will be full of special ed spaces. So all spaces will be filled with students as we're getting a lot of referrals right now. Because we have some students already in the 4-year-old program, that gives us more seats. If we didn't have those seats, then we run into some additional issues, such as we only provide services, which are additional services beyond preschool, which cost us more money, or we have to find other placements in preschools, or become a special ed placement, which is also very problematic. Lots of things happen that by having the 4-year-old placement, we have some buffer. And when in years when we have pockets like we are right now, where we're getting quite a few referrals. The other piece I can say, and it's more anecdotal, we don't have long-term information on this, but our kindergarten and first grade identified students are substantially lower than any other grade level. So what often would happen—
Do you mean percentile, like percentage?
Like our case management is substantial, and I don't want to throw out numbers that I would just be making up, but our case management numbers, so that the kids in kindergarten and first grade are much, much lower than those identified in 2nd, 3rd, and 4th and 5th.
Right.
And why? Could be a lot of reasons. One, prior to preschool, kids would come in and you'd have kids who had school experiences and had home experiences that put them at a level where they had a certain amount of educational fortitude, and others that had never had that experience. And so our referral rate of kids that were substantially below was much higher. So we would identify many more students in kindergarten and first grade than we do now. In fact, we really are, it's into first grade, 2nd grade, when we really are seeing disparities, which is the age of where you can really see learning disabilities as opposed to delays. And delays can often be lack of exposure. So by having the exposure, we're seeing less delay, less identification, until we really see another health impairment or a specific learning disability or a true communication disorder. So it's anecdotal. I don't have any data to prove that, but our numbers indicate that it's a lot different.
And it follows suit with the literature that's out there,
Mhm.
especially from the RAND research that happened that came out that the area actually in Chester County had been looking at early childhood learning as a goal many years ago with I think it was like Impact Med AdNoc. Yeah. So good. Thank you.
That's actually really, really important little random anecdote data. Could you get that, could you, I can only ask you, could you ask Jen to, or is the board okay of asking? I think that as we're moving forward with this conversation of including the preschool, whether in the, operating budget or through warrant article, that's actually a really big piece of it. We get more elaboration, more detail and data behind that?
And I think we
That's
can
that part of the
also
conversation.
summarize the research that exists nationally.
Yeah.
That my point in saying that was that with a little bit of information that we have, with a little bit of longitudinal anecdotal information that we have, it follows what the research says should take place. And when we talked about having universal access to pre-K like that for 4-year-olds, it's most important with that birth to 5, right? So for 4-year-olds, full day, we indicated that the district is going to receive a benefit. There will be an economic benefit, but you see that benefit as a community 12, 13, 14, 15 years down the road. So if you see that a little bit of that research is lining up with what we're doing, then you can perhaps believe a little bit more that this is an investment for the future of your community.
Good.
And that it will pay off.
No. All right. Are there any more further board questions, John?
Just one, I was just curious about the impact of the 504 program. Is that also administered through your division, and what are the costs of that, and do we get help from the state or the federal government on 504 plans?
So Section 504 is the Americans with Disabilities Act, so that people understand what we're talking about. That's a bigger, so if you think in circles, you have all, and then you have disabilities that fall within 504, and a 504 would be things like your doorways need to be wide enough for a wheelchair, there need to be ramps. Those are 504, the Disabilities Act, and then you may have a disability that also falls within IDA, which is a smaller circle. I don't oversee 504 specifically unless we got to a real problem, and then I oversee the legal ramifications. The cost for 504 is generally less in that there are not a lot of direct services. 504 tends to be accommodations that are put into place, such as extra time or colored papers, access to the elevator, a gazillion different things. There are some 504 plans, however, that a student does not require specially designed instruction, but does need a hearing specialist to come and train the staff on a cochlear implant. There is a cost involved in that, that comes out of the general education funds. And I don't know what that overall cost would be. I would guess overall across all schools, generally speaking, 504 is probably between $10,000 and $15,000. And
I'm sorry.
that's just a $10,000 and $15,000 altogether.
Okay,
Because it's part of all, it's part of the general ed process.
thank you.
Okay. Charlie, do you have any further for Dr. Horn?
No, I'm all set. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much, Jen. Does the board need a recess